So now the Triumph is out of action. I forgot to say in my update video that the rear caliper and the front 2 calipers seized. I fixed the front 2, but the rear one, I need a new rear caliper, so not going to be riding that for a bit. I don't exactly need to change all of the oil in the bike, but I'm going to do it anyway. You can just check the oil level, make sure there's enough oil in the bike, and make sure the oil doesn't look proper used and grubby. Just going to change the whole oil, and I'll show you guys how to do that. I'll show you how to check the oil as well. Some bikes require the bike to be warmed up a little bit before you check the oil, some bikes don't. You don't want to ride the bike for ages then check the oil though, because then the oil gets really thin and you won't get an accurate reading. Have a flat ground, level ground. Make sure you're not on a hill or anything, because that will affect the reading. There's 2 different ways to check oil. On this bike there is a little viewing glass. Some bikes don't have that, and they have a dipstick like on a car, which will be, it will look kind of like this, and it will be on the engine, on top of the engine. This is just for filling up the oil on this bike. Sometimes you get both the viewing glass and a dipstick, which is the case on my Triumph. Here you have full and low. Ideally you want it to be just a smidge before full, but some bikes don't like to be filled right to the full mark. Some bikes run best somewhere at the 3/4 mark. So I'd say the 3/4 marks is the best place to fill up to. So now it's level. I don't know if you can see the oil moving, and I can see that it's nice and black. It's not watered down, it's not all watery, and it doesn't look shit basically. Which kind of indicates that I'm probably alright for oil. In order to change all of the oil and not just top up the oil from here, you're going to need to drain all of the oil from the engine. Now the drain plug is there, which is lucky because some bikes you do have to take off the front guard here. It's best to put it on the center stand or try and get it as flat, as level as you can, because if it's leaning to the side, not all the oil isn't going to come out of the bike. So if it's really crappy oil and you want to drain all of it, then you're not going to get all of it on the side. So it's best to put it on something like this. That's nice and level now, so I can drain the oil and I can be sure that all of it's going to come out. Right, so you're probably going to want some kind of containers to contain the oil. I would say to get a bunch of unused bottles. Now it's going to be tricky to just fill the bottles up because it's going to come out so quickly. So you're going to need like something to hold the oil in first, then put it in these bottles. Right, I'm going to use an old paint tray because they're so cheap. Did not really think about this. The paint tray is not going to fit in there. Doing it like this is all right. Like, as I said, it's just not going to get every single drop of oil out. So I might just hold it up for a bit. Seems to be the same size as a spark plug, funny enough. Spark plug socket seems to work. Probably going to be done up pretty fucking tight if you've never undone it. Now this is the fun part, undoing it to the point that it's about to squirt out. Once you've got something underneath, try and hold the screw in. I've got it, it's undone completely now, but I'm holding it in place, and then just go, move out the way. Now you just let this drain and then put it in the containers. You have to dispose of oil properly. You can't just throw it in the bin because it's really bad for the environment. So you've got to find a place where you can dispose of the oil. When it gets really thin like that, like a really small stream, it does mean you're obviously coming to the end of the oil, but you should leave it quite you should leave it like 5 minutes to completely drain the oil. Now it's getting a bit thin. I'm gonna see, now it's stopped. If I tilt the bike upright, it's gonna be quite a, see, there you go. That goes to show there's still bloody loads of oil in there. It's gonna be really difficult not to get oil on your hands. I'd advise wearing some nitrate gloves. They're ones that aren't latex. They're like an alternative to latex. Or latex is fine, but if you're going to be doing really messy jobs, nitrate's good. They don't degrade as easily as latex. Latex tends to degrade really quickly when you've got oil and brake fluid all over your hands. I like to do things the ghetto way, you see. On your first service, I would say change all the oil. But again, like I said, if it looks alright, you might get away with it. It's just better to give your bike some love and give it some nice new oil, especially where my service is way overdue. If you've got a service booklet, it should say when you should do your service and how often you should do it. Now, to fill up the oil, like we said before, it's this thing here, and it will probably be in the same place on most motorbikes. I mean, on the Triumph it's here. I can't undo that with my fingers, but it's in the same place. The Triumph has a dipstick and a eye. If you've got an Apache, it's probably exactly the same. Now you're going to want to compare how much oil's come out. If you've left it for 5 minutes and let it drain completely, then compare the amount of oil that's come out as a rough guide on how much to put in. If you put in the oil in and the bike's on the side stand and you start seeing it go to full, then that's going to be way too much because the bike isn't level. So I'm now going to put the bike level, so when I can see it go to the right level on the eye, I know that it's not going to be too much. You want to sort of fill it up a bit, fair amount, then stop and let it settle for a bit, then start filling up again, because the oil needs to get round all the little nooks and crannies. Right, I can start seeing it filling up now, but it will start to go down again because it's starting to go through all the nooks and crannies. So you want to be careful to not overfill it, because overfilling oil is just as bad as not filling it enough. I can see it about halfway now, but like I said, it will go down slightly. Just let it settle for like 2-3 minutes. Obviously you want to look up your service manual what oil to use. In this bike it's just 10W40. Doesn't matter if you use semi-synthetic or fully synthetic. The difference is fully synthetic will probably last longer, and it is a bit better for your engine, but it's gonna obviously cost more money. I might start it up a little and let it run for a little tiny bit, then it will ensure the oil has circulated through the engine properly, and I can definitely get a good accurate reading. I don't want to run the engine too long, because then it will get too hot and too thin, and that'll be it won't be an accurate reading. So there we go, I can see the gauge moving to full now. Again, good idea to just wait a minute, let it settle, make sure it's gone around the engine. Now if you have run it for a bit, you're going to have to wait like 2-3 minutes. I'd say ideally wait 5 minutes before you check it, because again the oil is going to be around the engine and you've got to wait for it to settle to get a good accurate reading. And I'd say that's about done. Don't have to worry about this being that tight, but I would just grab a pair of pliers and try and do it up a tiny bit more, instead of just finger tight, because it can vibrate loose and then you're going to have oil pissing everywhere. So ideally you don't want that to happen. Right, next on the list is oil filter. Clean the oil filter of debris, replace if necessary. Really easy, 3 bolts. You want to do the oil filter before you do the oil. When you've drained the oil, then you want to do the oil filter. I mean, this is where it gets tricky, because if your oil is fine but your oil filter isn't, as soon as you undo this case, the oil from the engine is going to piss everywhere. So it's a really good idea to change the oil whilst you're doing the oil filter, because then you won't get oil everywhere. I've just done the oil now. I'm not going to check the oil filter because I'm confident it's going to be fine. This bike, it's not going to need a new oil filter for the first service. That's something that will go after a long amount of time.